Patricia's escalation tactics shifted into high gear after Michael's camouflage mailbox appeared. For her, this wasn't just about community standards anymore. It was personal. At the next HOA meeting, she devoted 20 minutes to what she called the barn situation, complete with a digital presentation and handouts on spiral-bound cardstock. As you can see from these satellite images, Patricia continued, using a laser pointer that danced across Michael's property on the projection screen. The subject property contains numerous violations of sections 4.2, 7.9, and 12.3 of our community bylaws. The 24 homeowners shifted uncomfortably in their folding chairs. Dave Henderson, a retired postal worker who'd lived in Riverdale Estates since its founding, finally raised his hand. "Patricia, I drove by there yesterday. It's just a guy with a barn, and isn't his place outside our—" "If I could finish, Dave," Patricia interrupted, her smile tightening. "Our legal counsel." She nodded toward her brother-in-law, who wasn't actually a real estate attorney, but had once taken a continuing education course on property law, "has confirmed our jurisdiction extends to aesthetic considerations that impact Riverdale Estate's property values." What Patricia didn't mention was that her legal confirmation consisted of a vaguely worded email that contained more caveats than commitments, or that her obsession with Michael's property began when he declined to purchase overpriced organic honey from her sister's apiary startup at the farmer's market. The next morning, Patricia established what she called her command center in her home office, a spare bedroom overlooking Michael's property. The walls gradually filled with printed photos of vehicles entering and leaving his driveway, timestamps meticulously noted in red ink. Her husband, Harold, accustomed to his wife's projects, knew better than to comment when she purchased an expensive telephoto lens for birdwatching. "It's the patterns, Harold," she explained over dinner one evening, spreading photographs across their dining table. "Every third Tuesday, like clockwork. Same unmarked vehicles. Same people carrying equipment inside. What farmer needs that many duffel bags?" Harold, who had actually grown up on a farm in Nebraska, stabbed at his roasted chicken. "Could be anything, Patricia. Feed deliveries, equipment repair. Maybe he's starting a business. Without proper permits?" Patricia's eyes gleamed with righteous indignation. "I've checked county records. No business license applications." What Patricia hadn't found, because it was classified, was Michael's special arrangement with the county sheriff and the federal government that bypassed standard permitting. Her next move was to establish neighborhood safety patrols that coincidentally routed past Michael's property during suspected activity periods. 2 HOA board members reluctantly agreed to participate, more to keep an eye on Patricia than on Michael. During one such patrol, board member Elaine Patel watched in horror as Patricia pulled into Michael's driveway and photographed license plates of vehicles parked near the barn. "Patricia," Elaine hissed from the passenger seat, "that's trespassing." "It's a welfare check," Patricia replied, using the HOA-approved term for what was essentially sanctioned snooping. "I'm concerned about unusual gatherings during a pandemic." When Michael emerged from his house moments later, Patricia froze, caught in headlights of her own making. But rather than confrontation, Michael simply waved, walked to his mailbox, and inserted a folded paper. Later, safely back in her living room, Patricia unfolded the note. "Property surveillance requires a warrant. Trespassing citations start at $500. Have a nice day." The note was printed on official-looking letterhead with a strange federal government seal Patricia didn't recognize, because it was the DEA's Special Operations Division logo, something few civilians would identify. Rather than deterring her, the note confirmed Patricia's suspicions. She upgraded her command center with motion-activated trail cameras disguised as birdhouses, strategically placed at the edges of her property line with views of Michael's barn. "This is how we'll catch them in the act," she told Harold, who was beginning to wonder if marital counseling might be cheaper than his wife's growing surveillance budget. "Whatever they're doing in that barn, they can't hide forever." The trap was set. Patricia just needed the right moment to spring it. The morning of the confrontation began with unusual stillness. Patricia had been tracking the pattern of activities for weeks, And this Tuesday promised to be significant. Her trail cameras had captured 3 unmarked vans arriving at Michael's property just after dawn, more vehicles than any previous gathering. "This is it, Harold," she announced, setting up her surveillance equipment with military precision. "Whatever they're running out of that barn, today's a big operation." Harold, who had taken the morning off from his accounting firm at Patricia's insistence that she might need a witness, gazed longingly at his half-eaten breakfast. "Should we just call the non-emergency line if you're concerned? Anonymous tip, maybe?" Patricia snorted. "So the sheriff can warn them again?" Jason Miller plays poker with tourists every Thursday. This was an assumption based on seeing the sheriff's vehicle at Michael's property once. In reality, they were reviewing security protocols, but Patricia's narrative had long since replaced fact. Through her high-powered binoculars, Patricia watched as more vehicles arrived. Men and women in casual clothing carried equipment bags inside. What really captured her attention was a tall man in a suit, clearly someone important, who arrived in a government-issue black Suburban. "That's it," Patricia whispered, reaching for her phone. "I'm calling the HOA lawyer." "It's 7:45 a.m., Harold protested weakly. "Fine. Then I'm going over there myself." What Patricia couldn't see from her vantage point was that today's operation was special indeed. The DEA had brought in Assistant U.S. Attorney James Williams to observe the training facility as part of an audit for a potential funding increase. Inside the barn, agents were setting up an elaborate mock scenario, a sophisticated drug processing operation with realistic props, including flour packaged to resemble cocaine and replica weapons for a tactical entry demonstration. Agent Dominguez was explaining the facility's advantages to AUSA Williams when Michael's security system pinged his phone. The perimeter alert showed Patricia marching across the field that separated their properties, her inappropriately formal attire making her look like a corporate executive lost on a hiking trail. "We might have company," Michael warned, stepping outside to intercept her. But Patricia had chosen her approach carefully, using a route that avoided Michael's front door camera. She reached the barn's side entrance before Michael could circuit around from the main house. Finding the barn door secured with an impressive padlock, Patricia pressed her face against a gap in the wooden slats, just as Agent Dominguez was demonstrating a cash count with stacks of replica currency to the Assistant U.S. Attorney. The agents, playing their roles, were dressed in tactical gear with training weapons visible on a table. The tableau couldn't have appeared more incriminating to untrained eyes. Through the narrow gap, Patricia saw what looked exactly like the drug operations she'd researched obsessively on crime documentaries. Cash, weapons, packages on tables, people in tactical gear, and maps with locations marked. Her gasp was audible enough to cause Agent Dominguez to turn sharply toward the sound. For a fraction of a second, his trained eyes met Patricia's wide ones through the gap in the wood. "Someone's watching," he announced calmly, signaling 2 agents to investigate. That was all Patricia needed. Adrenaline surging, she stumbled backward, nearly losing a heel in the soft ground. The sound of movement inside the barn spurred her into undignified retreat, half running through the field while fumbling with her phone. By the time she reached her property line, she was already connected to 911, her breath coming in panicked gasps that made the dispatcher repeatedly ask her to slow down. "Ma'am, please calm down and tell me exactly what you saw," the dispatcher requested. "Drugs." Patricia managed between breaths. "Weapons. At least 10 armed suspects at 1427 County Line Road. They're packaging something. Cocaine, I think. And they have maps. They saw me. Send everyone." "Ma'am, are you in danger right now?" the dispatcher asked, the question triggering emergency protocols. "The entire community is in danger," Patricia declared, reaching her back deck, where Harold stood frozen in confusion. "They're running a major operation out of that barn. This is what I've been reporting for months. Tell them to bring SWAT." As she disconnected, Patricia grabbed Harold's arm with surprising strength. "Get inside and lock the doors. I need to go live on the Neighborhood Watch page." "I saw what I saw, Harold," she snapped, already opening the neighborhood Facebook group on her phone. This is exactly why we need stronger HOA enforcement. And get my good camera. I'm documenting everything when they make the arrests. The arrangement seemed perfect on paper. Michael would receive $2,500 monthly for facility use, plus the significant security upgrades he could never have afforded on his pension alone. State-of-the-art cameras disguised as ordinary fixtures, reinforced doors with biometric locks camouflaged to look weathered, and a security system that could rival a small embassy. In exchange, the DEA gained access to an authentic rural training environment without the bureaucratic red tape of government facilities. We'll be discreet, Agent Dominguez had promised, his government-issue SUV parked well away from the road during that first meeting. Most operations will happen midweek when neighbors are at work. No sirens, no uniforms, nothing that screams federal agents at work. Michael had laughed then, a deep rumble that came easier now that he was away from the constant tension of deployment. Out here, my nearest neighbor is a quarter-mile away. You could run tank exercises and people would just assume I'm an enthusiastic farmer. He hadn't accounted for Patricia Wilkins. 3 weeks after signing the confidential agreement, Michael noticed the silver Lexus SUV driving slowly past his property. The same vehicle appeared again the following day, and the day after that, each time slowing to a crawl near his driveway. On the 4th day, Michael was splitting firewood in his front yard when the Lexus pulled up. The driver's window descended with mechanical precision to reveal a woman with immaculately highlighted blonde hair, designer sunglasses perched atop her head, and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good morning, Patricia Wilkins, Riverdale Estates HOA president." Her voice carried the practiced warmth of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced." Michael leaned on his axe handle. "Michael Torres, new owner. Don't believe I'm part of any HOA, ma'am." Patricia's smile tightened fractionally. "Well, technically, there's been some reasoning. Your property was recently incorporated into our community oversight area." She extended a glossy folder through the window. "Just some guidelines to help you understand our community standards. We're very particular about maintaining property values." Michael accepted the folder with soil-stained hands, leaving faint smudges on the pristine paper. "Appreciate the welcome, but I checked the county records before purchasing. My property is unincorporated county land." "Oh, that information is outdated. The council just approved our expansion last month." She gestured vaguely toward his barn. "We've had some concerns about agricultural structures being used for inappropriate activities in the area. Nothing about you specifically, of course." The conversation ended cordially enough, but as Michael watched the Lexus retreat down his gravel driveway, he felt the familiar prickle at the back of his neck, the same sensation that had kept him alive in hostile territory. He pulled out his phone and texted Agent Dominguez. "Might have a situation developing. How visible is your next training exercise?" That evening, Michael drove to the county records office, where a helpful clerk confirmed what he already knew. His property remained firmly outside any HOA jurisdiction. The expansion Patricia mentioned existed only in unofficial HOA documents that held no legal weight. Michael took certified copies of the relevant records, then stopped by the sheriff's office to introduce himself, a courtesy call that would prove invaluable later. When the first official-looking violation notice appeared in his mailbox the following week, citing unsightly agricultural structures and suspicious gatherings, Michael pinned it to his refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a hand grenade, a gag gift from his former unit. By the third notice, which threatened escalating fines and legal action, the humor was wearing thin. The DEA training continued as scheduled, though now with greater precautions. Vehicles arrived via the back access road. Agents were briefed on maintaining the farmer with occasional visitors cover story, and Michael installed the special camouflage mailbox specifically for Patricia's notices, which arrived with increasing frequency and urgency. "It's like living in a Cold War," Michael joked to Agent Dominguez as they watched the latest security footage of Patricia photographing his property from the edge of her yard. "Except one side doesn't know there's a war at all." Neither man could have predicted just how hot that Cold War would become. "Your documentation skills are impressive, even if misapplied." The sheriff and I are developing a community emergency preparedness program. We need someone detail-oriented to coordinate it." Instead of pressing charges, Sheriff Miller clarified, seeing Patricia's confusion. "Community service," Michael explained. "Using your powers for good instead of, well, harassment." Harold supplied helpfully, earning a sharp look from his wife. The program took shape faster than anyone expected. Patricia approached her community service with the same intensity she devoted to HOA enforcement, creating color-coded emergency response binders for every household and organizing monthly preparedness workshops. The following summer, Riverdale Estates hosted its first Public Safety Day in the community park. Children climbed on police vehicles, residents practiced using fire extinguishers, and Michael's barn, temporarily transformed into an educational space, welcomed visitors with DEA agents demonstrating legal aspects of their work. Patricia, directing volunteers with her clipboard, paused beside Michael, who was grilling hamburgers for the crowd. "You didn't have to do this, you know," she said quietly. "Give me a second chance." Michael flipped a burger before responding. "In Afghanistan, I learned something important about enemies." He looked at her directly. "Sometimes they make the best allies, once you understand each other." Patricia considered this. "I'm still watching you, Torres." "I know," he grinned. "But now you know what you're actually seeing." As they looked across the community gathering, Harold animatedly discussing tax deductions with Agent Dominguez, neighbors laughing together, children playing safely, Patricia reluctantly acknowledged that perhaps some boundaries were worth respecting and others worth crossing in the right ways. "Next time," Michael added, handing her a plate, "just knock on the front door." The emergency HOA meeting following the barn incident was scheduled for 7:00 p.m. at the community clubhouse, but residents began arriving by 6:15, creating a line that snaked through the parking lot. Inside, board members hastily arranged extra chairs as the crowd swelled beyond any meeting in Riverdale Estates' 15-year history. Patricia and Harold arrived at 6:55, walking a gauntlet of whispers and stares. Patricia had spent the afternoon with her attorney, not her brother-in-law this time, but an actual criminal defense lawyer who specialized in federal cases. Her usually perfect hair showed signs of stress-induced neglect, and Harold's perpetual expression of quiet resignation had deepened to something approaching existential dread. Vice President Angela Rodriguez called the meeting to order with visible discomfort. "As you're all aware, we've gathered to discuss recent events involving our HOA and neighboring properties." Her careful wording couldn't disguise the real agenda, displayed on everyone's phones as they scrolled through news coverage of HOA President's false alarm triggers multi-agency response. The meeting devolved quickly when Maggie Chen, the elderly treasurer, abandoned procedural niceties. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she interrupted Angela's careful phrasing. "Patricia called a SWAT team on a federal training facility because they didn't file a paint color approval form." Laughter erupted, causing Patricia to clutch her leather portfolio tighter. When given the floor, she attempted to reframe the narrative. "As your HOA president, I was fulfilling my duty to report suspicious activities that could affect our property values." "You live-streamed what you thought was a drug bust," someone called from the back. "And while there may have been a misunderstanding about jurisdiction, the sheriff is billing you for the helicopter," another voice added. As the meeting spiraled into chaos, an unexpected arrival silenced the room. Michael Torres entered quietly, accompanied by Sheriff Miller. They took seats at the back, declining offers to move forward. The board vote to formally exclude Michael's property from HOA jurisdiction passed unanimously. When the follow-up motion for Patricia's resignation was introduced, she rose with surprising dignity. "That won't be necessary," she said, her voice tight but controlled. "I've already drafted my resignation, effective immediately." With theatrical finality, she slammed her commemorative HOA gavel through the glass-topped table before turning to leave, only to return moments later for her forgotten designer purse, deflating her dramatic exit. 3 days later, Patricia found herself in the last place she expected, Michael's living room, perched uncomfortably on a leather sofa beside Harold, who kept nervously adjusting his tie. The bourbon in this cake is from my personal collection, Michael said, cutting generous slices of the bundt cake Patricia had brought as a peace offering. Kentucky's finest. Agent Dominguez, present under the pretense of reviewing protocols, accepted a slice with amused interest. Mr. Torres, Patricia began, reading from note cards. I sincerely apologize for my actions, which resulted in disruption to federal operations and unnecessary allocation of emergency resources. The words, clearly crafted with legal assistance, sounded mechanical until Harold gently placed his hand over hers, causing her to look up. I'm sorry, she said simply, without cards. I was wrong. Michael studied her for a moment, then surprised everyone. How are you with organizing emergency response plans? What? Patricia blinked in confusion. The chaos unfolding at Michael's property quickly exceeded even Patricia's wildest expectations. The Riverdale County Sheriff's Department had implemented a new rapid response protocol following a training session with, ironically, the DEA the previous month. Patricia's mention of multiple armed suspects, drugs, and her claim of being spotted triggered their highest alert level. Sheriff Miller was in the middle of his morning briefing when the call came in. He froze momentarily at the address, a look of confusion crossing his weathered face before he grabbed his radio. All units, respond with caution. Possible training exercise confusion, but protocol demanded full response until confirmed otherwise. Meanwhile, Patricia had positioned herself on her second-floor balcony with her camera equipment, narrating developments to her live audience of 37 Riverdale Estates residents who had nothing better to do on a Tuesday morning. As you can see, she narrated dramatically as police vehicles began arriving. Authorities are finally taking action against the suspicious activities I've been reporting for months. Harold watched in horror from inside, phone clutched in his sweating hand, debating whether to call their homeowners insurance to check if legal defense coverage was included in their policy. At Michael's property, the first responding officers had taken positions behind their vehicles, weapons drawn, creating a standoff with the equally confused DEA agents inside the barn, who were now aware something was seriously wrong. Riverdale County Sheriff's Department called out Deputy Rodriguez through a bullhorn. We have reports of armed suspects and drug activity. Exit the building with your hands visible. Inside the barn, AUSA Williams turned to Agent Dominguez with an expression of disbelief. Is this part of the training scenario? Negative, Dominguez responded, already on his secure phone to headquarters. We've got a situation. Michael, who had been in his workshop behind the house when the commotion began, emerged to find his peaceful property transformed into what looked like a scene from an action movie. His military training kicked in immediately. Assess, diffuse, protect. Grabbing his credentials, he walked slowly with hands visible toward Sheriff Miller, who had just arrived. Cason, Michael call me. Training exercise today. DEA operation with federal prosecutor observing. Someone made a mistake. The sheriff's expression morphed from tense concentration to dawning comprehension, followed quickly by anger. He lowered his weapon and signaled other officers to stand down. Torres, please tell me this isn't because of your favorite HOA president? Michael finished. Pretty sure it is. She was spotted peering into the barn about 15 minutes ago. The sheriff grabbed his radio. All units, stand down. Confirmed federal training exercise. I repeat, stand down. Then, under his breath, and someone tell the damn helicopter to return to base. But the damage was done. The spectacle had drawn attention beyond Patricia's live stream. 2 local news vans had arrived, attracted by the police scanner chatter about a major drug bust. Reporters were already setting up cameras at the edge of the property, capturing footage of confused police officers and federal agents now awkwardly introducing themselves. As the misunderstanding became clearer, all eyes turned toward Patricia's house. The sheriff, Agent Dominguez, and AUSA Williams approached her property together, their expressions promising a conversation Patricia was unprepared for. Her live stream followers watched in real time as Patricia's triumphant narration faltered. They appeared to be consulting with each other. This is standard procedure in multi-jurisdictional, She trailed off as she recognized the sheriff's unmistakable glare directed at her house. "Harold," she hissed, momentarily forgetting she was still broadcasting. "They're coming here. What do I do?" Harold appeared beside her, his face ashen. "I think you should end the live stream, for starters. But my documentation will be used as evidence," he finished grimly. "Against you." The live stream ended abruptly, cutting off just as the doorbell rang with an innocuous chime that belied the gravity of the situation. Patricia smoothed her blazer with trembling hands and descended the stairs, Harold trailing behind like a reluctant shadow. Opening her front door revealed not just local law enforcement, but federal agents and a particularly unimpressed man in an expensive suit who introduced himself as an assistant United States attorney. "Mrs. Wilkins," he began without preamble, "do you understand the seriousness of filing a false report that has just disrupted a federal law enforcement training operation?"